No. And what I should do is acknowledge, first of all, that I'm currently situated on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. And if you would like to acknowledge the country on which you are right now, please feel free to use the chat to do that. So just a little bit of housekeeping. As I said, this will go for about an hour. It'll be a mixture of me talking and you interacting. It is being recorded, so you can go back and refer to it on the DIF website at any stage. And I will be also emailing a follow-up email over the next 48 hours, and that will contain some show notes. So a slide deck with some bullet points summing up the main points I want to make, and some hyperlinks to a couple of resources I thought you might like. This is called Beyond PowerPoint, so no way was I going to use PowerPoint. I just couldn't do it. So you're stuck with me and our faces on camera, and we'll see how we go. What I would like you to do, I just want to go around the group right now, and I'm just going to ask you to give your name, just your name, and then I'm going to challenge you in 3 words to think about your experience of online conversations or workshops, whether that's on Zoom, Microsoft Teams or some other platform. And I warn you, I tend to use Zoom as a thing to mean all of them because I use Zoom all the time, but that's what I mean when I say Zoom. So think about your experience of online workshops or discussions and sum it up in 3 words, 3 adjectives, no sentences. So I would say, I'm Meredith, and my 3 adjectives are inspiring, frustrating, hopeful. And then we go on to the next person. Understood. Who wants to go first? I'll pick someone. I'm the volunteers. Jessica, your mic's off, so.
Oh, you mean my mic's on?
Oh, sorry, your mic's on. Yes.
Yeah.
Well put.
Damn.
Well picked up there.
Hi, I'm Jessica. I'll turn my ears because I've had such, hang on a second. I will turn my camera on while I say hello to everybody. I was just explaining to some of the people here earlier that I've been having internet issues, so I'm sitting with my camera off a bit of the time. My name's Jessica, and my 3 words are frustrating, I'm trying to think of, creative.
Frustrating, creative.
Creative. Oh, I'm trying to think. I'm not good at 1 words.
It's more challenging than it seems.
I know what it is that I want to describe, but I can't think of it in 1 word.
We'll move on and we'll circle back to you.
Yeah, come back to me.
Yeah. Who wants to go next? Yep, Margaret.
I'll go next. Yeah, I'll go next. Variable. Welcoming. And hopeful.
Yeah. Thank you. Somebody else, Dee.
Yeah, connected, global, and opportunity.
That was my word.
Great.
Nice.
While I was just thinking, yeah, I'll say opportunity. So there you go.
There you go.
I'm done.
Lovely.
Good words.
Susan, your mic's on.
Okay, so I would say I'm Susan, and my words are expansive, portal, not connecting, portal, and illuminating.
Great, thank you. which leaves us with Mel or Sharon and Olga. Olga's got some technical doings happening. So Sharon.
Hi, I'm Sharon. I'm going to start with the word numerous because I've done it numerously. International. I was thinking about global, and then I thought it was really international. And I'm trying to think of a really good word for the opposite of intimate. And the only thing I can come up with is distant, but that probably doesn't really capture it. But what I mean is, you know, and you said not to put it in a sentence, but what I'm trying to convey is, I guess, the lack of intimate connection that is there inherently in Zoom. And the difficulty is to establish a more intimate connection.
Distant?
And distant is probably the
Yes.
only word that I can immediately jump to my head without going through the thesaurus, which is all the way over there.
No, that's fair enough. And I do want to talk to that distancing effect tonight, actually, Sharon, because a lot of people find that. Mel, how are you going? Have you come up with 3 words?
Well, I have, and the words are, just doing a single word is really quite challenging without having a whole lot of meaning behind it, isn't it? I had inquisitive, creative, and illiterate.
Lovely, thank you. And I'm not sure, Olga has left a message in chat saying her mic and video have been disabled. She's on her way. So we might let Olga check in with us in a sec, unless she's there right now. No, but hopefully Olga will get to us in a second. Okay, I want to explain why I was emboldened to put on this session tonight beyond PowerPoint. I've just got a memory in my mind. I'm going back to late winter in 2020. I tuned in to an online conference that was being beamed out of Europe by an organisation called the House of Beautiful Business. Wonderful organisation. And it was during that long second lockdown we had down here in Melbourne. And I live alone. I felt alone. It was late at night. It was dark outside. It was cold. And I felt quite desolate, I have to confess, desolate and tired. I tuned in keeping with the European time zone, late at night, and I tuned into a session and on Zoom, and the chat master asked us all to write our names and where we were coming from in the world, in the chat. And I looked at the names and places: Pavel from Johannesburg, Thomas from New York, Sharon from a little village in Dorset, Naomi from Tokyo, Meredith from Melbourne. And it was like being in the dark and looking out and seeing lights go on in the distance. As all these people from around the world converged their focus and attention on this one session on Zoom. The session was storytelling. The hosts invited each person to tell a very short story. And in their studio in Europe, they had a dancer who, in response to each story, improvised a short dance for about 2 minutes. It was very beautiful. It was very moving. And I felt the most incredible sense of connection with these people from all over the world. That was a wonderful experience via Zoom. 2 weeks ago, I tuned into a Zoom session. It was 2 hours long. It heavily relied on PowerPoint that was crammed with tiny print and lots of bullet points. There was a voice reading the bullet points. The voice was monotonal, it was flat, it was grating. The information was presented in a way that was dry, and I thought, kill me now. I don't know how I made it through the whole 2 hours. It was painful in the extreme, and I couldn't believe that anybody would undertake to put themselves as a presenter and an audience through that. So I've been inspired to put this session on tonight because I think people will always love face-to-face and in real life connections, always. There's no competition there. But I think during lockdown, what I learned was that Zoom doesn't have to be awful. It doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't have to leave people with a sense of being distanced or disconnected. Zoom can be an amazing format for creative conversations, intimate conversations, connecting conversations, and highly effective training and teaching as well. So I wanted to run a session where we discussed that, where I imparted a little bit of some of the things I think I've seen from some really, really great examples of best practice, and maybe hear of some of your examples as well. What I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those principles, what I call design principles and facilitation techniques. I'm going to put you into breakout rooms to have a chat with each other. I'm also going to facilitate a group discussion towards the end of the session where we talk about things. So what I might do is, and I think poor old Olga's logged off and she may log on to fix her mic and video problems. But what I might do, I've got 6 of you. I'm going to put the 6 of you in breakout rooms, 2 people in each breakout room. I'll give you 5 minutes and I want each of you to share a story. So you get 2.5 minutes each. Share a story of the worst Zoom experience you've ever had, or the worst online experience you've ever had. Go hard, bitch and whine, and talk about how absolutely awful it is. And then we'll come back and we'll talk about how that might be fixed. Is that clear? Yeah. Okay, great. So one bad thing about Zoom, thanks, Susan. Really, really good question. The breakout rooms are not recorded. They're going to be personal and you will be invisible. So I'll just put you all in the breakout rooms, and it's that slightly glitchy thing on Zoom where we all have to wait awkwardly while I do this. And I'll see you in 5 minutes. Okay, for the benefit of people watching, because this is being recorded, of course. So if you're watching, this is some of my attempt in designing this session to break up the session. So it's just not me talking all the time, and to give people a chance to get to know each other, meet somebody new. So emphasizing the social aspect of Zoom, the connecting aspect of Zoom. Give people a chance to have a good old yak, create time to have a chat. This isn't a huge group, and I actually like small groups on Zoom because it does give people a chance to interact. Most of my sessions, I'm a creativity coach and I help people reclaim their imagination. So most of my sessions are highly, highly interactive. This is a little bit less so. So I always look for ways of finding as much time for people to interact and to share their stories as possible. We will have a group discussion later on. It's not a huge group, so we should be able to manage that quite well. If this was a large group, I would be using breakout rooms for interactivity and relying less on whole group chats. I might, do some Q&A and ask if anybody had a question, or ask 1 or 2 people to volunteer a story, but obviously not everybody can share. But the other way I can make sure things are interactive with a very large group is use the Zoom chat as well. And I'm sure you've seen that in other sessions. But the point I'm trying to make, I guess, during this session is to think about breaking up the session with different types of activities. So from one person talking to use of breakout room, to another type of activity, to group discussion, and hopefully that will keep it somewhat interesting. Oops, that's my timer. And hopefully people should be joining us soon. Here we go. Hello, welcome back.
Hello.
Hello. Would anybody, and look, I'm being a little bit fascist in controlling time in this section because it is just an hour. But does anybody want to really quickly, in like 2 sentences and a few seconds, share a nightmare story of being online?
Happy to share one from yesterday.
Yes, please.
I was just sharing this with Margaret. So I've been with St. John Ambulance as a medical first responder for 17 years. And every year our medical first responders need to complete a training session, a training program. And I'm one of the trainers. So while I don't design the training, I certainly haven't, I cannot, I will not claim to designing any of that training. I do have skills in training and design. I'm not working for them. But I do deliver the training. And it was Monday's last night's session was particularly one of their worst. Wow. That we've received. I received a training package which comprised of 85 slides, 86 slides, which is fine. But it was a lot of small text on screen, a lot of bullet points, and it was really horribly organized. It was, some of it was downright irrelevant. And the facilitator guide was really no help. And I spent 2 hours looking at all the material going, how do I spin this into something, but we're governed by St. John Ambulance and what we have to deliver and how they want us to deliver it. So I don't really get much in leadway. But and they're not renowned for their most brilliant PowerPoints, you know, they're you know, but this was a particular terrible one.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be writing a letter.
Fair enough. I can empathise. I used to be a gun for hire as a facilitator trainer, and you're highly reliant on sometimes the script you're constrained to deliver, and sometimes you get given some really great material to deliver, and sometimes not, and it's very frustrating. And I used to feel like saying to people, "This is not me. This is not me. This is not how I roll." So thanks for sharing that story.
No worries. I guess as someone who designs training packages for a living, outside of St. John, because St. John is a voluntary thing for me, as I design training, and I honestly wanted to burn that thing to the ground.
Yeah,
It's
must
enough
have
to
been
get
doubling
PTSD
frustrated.
from having to deliver it.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Sharon,
Yeah.
I feel like you need to name and shame. There's only a few of us here. Please name the package, the program.
Oh, so if you're part of St. John, I guess I'm from St. John Event Health Services. So we have a volunteer. We're all volunteers. So we do provide first aid services and medical first aid services to events. And we also back up the health services like Ambulance Victoria. But
No. Oh, the actual program doesn't have a name.
no, well, this is the training program.
Can I just remind people that we're being recorded?
Yeah.
As well.
So if you're a
good.
volunteer first, if you join us as a volunteer, you have a training package that you need to go through 12 every year. So, you know, it's created by volunteers. It's as much as sorry, that was my phone. It's created by volunteers for the volunteers to go through, but it's a mandatory thing each one has to go to. It's not accredited or nationally recognized training.
Okay, thanks. So that's a great example, actually, Sharon, and we'll be able to unpack that a little bit more as we go along. I've just seen something that Susan has shared with us, beautiful little thing in chat saying words for the eye and words for the ear travel through different realms, different pathways. On the back of that, and bearing that in mind, I think that's a great point. And on the back of what Sharon, some of the things Sharon was just talking about, I just want to share with you what I call some design principles. And these are things that I have noticed over the last couple of years in designing workshops and conversations myself, but also hopping on Zoom and seeing some really great work being done as well, and trying to analyze what made things work. And a big problem with Zoom, as somebody, I think it was Sharon, was saying, is that it can give people a tremendous sense of disconnect, of distancing. And it's disheartening too, as a presenter or facilitator, when you sense that your Zoom audience is feeling distanced and kind of dead and bored as well. But I would put it to you that as an event designer, as an experience designer, I'm going to call it that, and as a facilitator, you have to give people a reason to be present, to be tuned in. And that means you have to give them compelling content, a fluent delivery, appropriate interactivity, and you have to think about the design of your session. This session tonight, I'm not using PowerPoint at all, because how can I if I call the bloody thing beyond PowerPoint? And I'm not going to teach you how to wrangle technologies, because I reckon there's a clip somewhere on YouTube that can tell you how to use your digital platform or tool of choice. I'm not about that. I want us to think about experience design and not hiding behind technology, which is what I think people are doing when they whack up that terrible Zoom PowerPoint presentation that Sharon just described for us so well. The people are being a little bit lazy and they're hiding behind technology. Maybe they're not confident in themselves as facilitators and conversation designers. I think when we talk about experience design, and for me, this is not just true of online sessions, but I used to be an events manager and an arts manager, and it's true of any face-to-face presentation or event or performance. We're talking about experience design, and that means thinking about the experience that your participants or your audience are having. That means being empathetic to their needs and their experience, thinking, what is it like to sit on your butt for 2 hours and listen to some bloody boring presentation and stare into a laptop at some badly designed PowerPoint? Or what is it like to hop on Zoom if you live by yourself in Melbourne during a lockdown and connect with a whole bunch of other people and hear their stories from all around the world? So it's thinking about that empathy and having that empathy. It's thinking about the impact or the experience you want your attendees to have and what your goals there are. Do you want people to have a sense of connection? Do you want people to walk away feeling informed and feeling empowered about using the information that you've given them? So thinking about that. I think the really great Zoom stuff I've witnessed over the last 2 years had a clear idea of what I'm going to call narrative design or a narrative arc. So they thought about the session as having a shape and a narrative, and thought about what kind of experience, what kind of dynamics or energies they were going to ask people to experience at any given time. When did they want people to feel energized? When did they want them to feel reflective? When did they want people chatty? When did they want people to feel quiet? When did they want people to feel amused or stimulated? When did they want them to feel sober? Also thinking about, depending on what you're doing, maybe you're imparting information. So when are you going to give people the information, tell people the information? And when are you going to give people a chance to absorb that information and process what they've just heard? And what activities are you going to choose to allow them to do that? So do you talk for a little bit? Do you even use a really well-designed PowerPoint to present some information and then give people a moment to step out and maybe do a short 5-minute exercise by themselves, or go into a breakout room with another person to talk about what they've just seen, or to have a group discussion and some Q&A? So just thinking about that experience for your participants is really, really key. And I think the underlying design principle that I've witnessed, I'm saying it out loud and it sounds sort of basic, and yet it's amazing how often I think it doesn't get done. That example Sharon just shared is a really good example. The story I told about that really painful 2-hour session I sat through two weeks ago, there was no way they were thinking of the experience of the listener. I now also want to share a few facilitation techniques that I thought worked really well and have worked really well for me. Because when you decide on your narrative arc and the design, overall design of your session, when you've decided what kind of impact you want to have for your audience, what kind of experience, and decided at what parts of your session you're going to deliver or create certain atmospheres or moods or dynamics, then you can start choosing appropriate content, appropriate activities, appropriate facilitation techniques or delivery modes. So some techniques I've seen that work really well are storytelling is a favorite of mine. I think once you get people telling stories, all kinds of things happen. Stories engage people's imaginations. They engage people's emotions. They engage people's memories. And memory is a very powerful driver of learning and creativity. We are all storytellers. It's an intuitive, innate quality humans have. So it's dead simple to set up as a facilitator, and it's dead simple to respond to, and yet it's extremely powerful. Stories can enliven even quite dry factual things, I believe. I've think I've seen that happen really well, and it's worked really well for me as a facilitator. So if you have to deliver a safety policy, you could ask at some stage for people to share a story about a time they felt unsafe in the workplace, or when they believe they've seen the policy well delivered. And it enlivens the story and it breaks up the sound of one person droning on, like I'm doing right now. So I'm going to keep this short and hand back over to you. So storytelling is great. I really commend it to you. Another thing, getting back to the point that's been made earlier about Zoom's tendency to let people feel very disconnected or distanced. It's a real thing, Zoom fatigue. People, there's something about tuning in and dealing with the technology that's a little bit extra fatiguing for people. So I've seen techniques used where people find ways, presenters find ways of asking their participants to be embodied. And it's bringing people away from cyberspace, just tuning into this kind of rectangle in front of you and being embodied in time and now. And it's quite simple and quite powerful. That can be as simple as getting people to close their eyes and taking a few deep breaths. It can be as simple as encouraging people to get up out of their chair and take a stretch. So if you've got a 2-hour workshop and the talking has been intense, get people in the middle of it to get up and take a stretch, take a little walk around. Seen a couple of madly extroverted sessions where people have been encouraged to dance. So I think you'd have to choose your audience, but it can work for the right people. And another thing about embodying people and bringing people back to a grounded place is you can also use the imagination for that. So ask people, without naming the food, ask them to describe the last thing they ate, how it tasted, how it smelt. Ask them to look out the window and describe the weather. Ask them to describe how something touches, a favourite piece of clothing, how it feels when they touch it. And this shifts the mind out of that shallow intellectual place and into a more embodied place. It's a great way of shifting people's thinking into an imaginative space, a more creative space as well. Just these little exercises by themselves won't transform a whole Zoom session, but as part of a well-designed Zoom session that's really well delivered, they can be really, really, really helpful. The final tip I'm going to give you is, instead of PowerPoint, during a Zoom session, think about getting it to them after, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to send you a PowerPoint session. A PowerPoint slide deck afterwards in my follow-up email. So you're going to hear us talk about it, and then you'll have that to refer to if you want it. Or you can provide information to people before a session. I tuned into a terrific conference a couple of years ago where they did that. They had people pre-record a 15-minute presentation. That went live the week before the conference. We all watched them. And then during the conference, there were no presentations. There were only Q&A sessions about the material we'd already watched. It was very effective. Margaret, you and I remember when we were co-facilitating, you were thinking about doing that with one of your courses.
Yep. Still want to do it. I've got a couple of conferences next year, so you've just reminded me that that's a great idea. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it can work really, really well. So yeah. I feel like I've babbled enough. So with that swimming around in your head, you may yourselves have used or deployed or witnessed other really good design principles or techniques. I'm going to put you back in a breakout room now, another 5 minutes. This time I want you to share with each other, so 2 minutes each, share with each other your best Zoom experience and think about how some of those really good design principles might have worked with that. Okay, any questions? Clear as mud? All right. Here we go. And I'll see you in 5 minutes. Oh, I should say, if you are watching this as a recording, I will be putting that slide deck with the bullet point summary up on a blog on my website. And you should be able to link through to my website via the DIF website where you've probably found this recording. So you can go and have a look if that's your idea of a good time. And I'll also say that I've actually got a 2-hour version of this workshop where I allow people far more time to get their hands sticky in terms of talking through how to design a session. But I just thought I'd go with the free 1-hour version for DIF 22. Right. Welcome back. We're going to move into some open group discussion for the rest of the session. I just want to take 1 minute though to share a few really great examples of online presentations I've seen over the last couple of years. I tuned into a session where a guy who was based in Lisbon in Portugal was talking about his PhD research, which was all about generating neighbourhoods and communities. And he was interested in architecture. And he got us to get up out of our seats, walk outside. He gave us 10 minutes to do this. He said, I want you to look at your neighbourhood, look at the houses you walk past every day, and choose an architectural feature that you've never noticed before. And for example, for me, I found a tiny window high up in somebody's house that I'd never noticed. And then he gave us an interesting task. He said, imagine that house is out of a fairy tale and you can eat it. And I want you to imagine what it tastes like, what it smells like, what it feels like. And my window was like toffee for me. Another masterclass that I wangled myself into, a facilitation masterclass, was being beamed out of the Netherlands. And the woman who was teaching that got us to get up out of our chairs again. She gave us 15 minutes for this task. She got us to get a tray or a big book and use the flat back of it, plus various ornaments that we grabbed from around our house, and to make a little diorama. And the diorama was to symbolize lockdown. And then she put us into breakout rooms, and got us to explain our diorama to each other. And it was fascinating, the depth of storytelling that engendered. Really interesting technique. A couple of weeks ago, I tuned into another lady talking about her PhD research. I forget what it was about, but I remember a technique she used, because her research was very interesting, except I can't remember it, but very factual and very informative. But she broke it up at one stage by showing us a little skit she'd recorded just on Zoom with two colleagues, talking, enacting dialogue. And she used that to make a point instead of just telling us. So it was like show instead of telling. And I like that. It broke up the flow of information. Another session I tuned into was a storytelling meetup coming out of Wales. I get around digitally. And a lady who ran storytelling workshops told people how she gets people to put a sock on their hands and make a sock puppet and tell stories through the sock puppet. And she said that's a way of getting past people's inhibitions. And I found that very interesting as well. So those are just some examples of how people are being extremely creative in terms of what they're doing online. Of course, the success of this always will depend on who your audience is and what experience you want for them. So what works for one person won't work for another. I found them really interesting. So I wanted to ask you to maybe share some examples of what you've seen that has worked online, and what you think the design principle or technique behind it that makes it work is. If that's understandable. So share an example of something you've seen work and then tell us why it works. That's a better way of putting it. Do I have any volunteers? Mel? Yeah, thanks.
So I was just telling Jessica about a conference that I attended. From the start of Zoom, this company has had a couple. So I work in the mental health industry, and they had a suicide prevention summit. So as you can imagine, the content was extremely heavy. We had five different presenters each day, but each presenter would start on the hour, and then they would talk for 40, 45, maybe 50 minutes, and then you'd have some question time to lead up to that hour, and then you would have an hour break. So for the whole day, you had one at 9, one at 11, one at 1, 3, and 5. So when you had that hour break, you would actually get up and you'd actually be motivated to go and do stuff. And you could even get in a half-hour walk as well as still making a cup of coffee. You could go and hang washing on the line. You could go and put my washing on, or you could get out in the garden. You know, you knew that you had that hour to get moving because you were going to be sitting down again for the next hour. But it was, I found it was a really great method to use. And as I said, they've had multiple summits over you know, the last 2.5 years. They've done really great. And I suppose if we look at why they've done it this way, I think it was, you like, if I don't know about you, but I know that any other Zoom meeting I've been to, or any kind of education session I've been to, and they say to you, come back in 15 minutes, everyone's always late. You never come back in 15 minutes because you need more time to move around. Whereas this, everyone was back on time because they'd had that hour break. It did take up the whole weekend. There was 2 days. It did take up the whole weekend, but I felt like I'd still moved around a lot as well.
Yeah, great point, Mel. And I bet you took in information a lot better because you had that time for it to settle. I think that's a really lovely example of some people who've thought about the experience that their participants are having, that they're sitting there and via the internet, they're getting this quite heavy, demanding material. So they've programmed that time in. So yeah, great example. Thank you. Does anybody else have an example to share?
Yeah, if I could, it's Susan here. I'm sorry I have to leave so promptly. I thought I'd jump in and speak now. What I can contribute and offer is from the realm that I work in with persona, which is voice coaching. When I can get people to understand that listening, it is their own inner self that is doing the hearing, discriminating, understanding, and memorizing. Whereas when they're writing or making a bullet point or typing, the machine is doing the work, which is often why when we write it down, we then can't remember, we have to look again, because the eyes will look for scanning and discriminating and can take in an encyclopedia, a vast vision and view, whereas the ears, they have to do it more intensely and they remember the feel of it, and it's a deeper sense, or perceptually it feels a deeper sense closer into you. So some people resist or are simply not practiced. They're so used to using their eyes with texting and email that now to spend time listening, they find it very, very draining, or they don't trust that they're going to remember. So that's why we go slow. It's not, everyone knows to go slow is good teaching advice for speaking, but it's so that the receiver, in their receiving way with their ears, that can't scan again and go back like eyes can, they have to be given the sounds and little tiny pieces like feeding the baby. You can't give it to them as you can on a screen, like where you can flow it up and they can take a screenshot or they can come back to it later. And once we start talking about senses and we realize the receiver is receiving in a different way, always, like you said, Meredith, always focusing first on how is this going to be received. It's just the most fundamental principle of communicating.
Yeah. Yes, great point. Thanks, Susan.
The digital's just the energy, or we're the energy, and that's what we've got to decide.
Yes, and it's amazing how, and I think, Susan, we were talking about this the other day in a session too. It's amazing how even via Zoom, you can transmit energy, and people don't believe that, but you can. Yeah. Zoom's a fascinating medium. I think just thinking about how people do receive things and where Zoom does and doesn't work. But a great thing about Zoom is it does offer people a lot of agency. Like even now, and we're all here except for Susan, it's all nighttime for us. And we're all probably a bit tired. Some of us might have had to have had dinner or something like that. Some people are having internet issues. And during this session, people have been turning their cameras on and off as they've needed. And I actually like that about Zoom. It gives people a little bit of choice. I think that distinction between hearing, which is demanding, but it actually helps people take stuff on board, and seeing or listening is a really interesting one. So thanks for highlighting that, Susan. And it's another thing we can talk about in terms of experience design. Does anybody else have something to share in the last few minutes? Yeah. or Dee?
Yeah, I would just say that so a friend and I, we co-facilitate together, and we use a lot of technology in terms of like Menti and Mural in ways to bring people together. So connection is at the core of everything we do. And so we only use technology for that purpose of connecting people, but really using, I'm a visual designer, so you're really using a lot of visual elements to tell a story and these sort of things. And we've hosted workshops with 60 people in northwest Syria and Iraq, where they've got all manner of internet, and the connection that happened between them was phenomenal because of this whole process of really engaging visually and then pair groups and all of these things. So I think technology is really underused. It can be a wonderful thing to bring people, you know, the just Mural and that sort of stuff, like really great way to bring people together and take them on a really nice learning journey. And I think that is often underused. I haven't really seen it in many other workshops as being a way to connect and collaborate.
I think that's a great point, Dee, because it gives me an opportunity to say that this session isn't anti-technology. In fact, I think it's pro-technology, because I'm saying Zoom is a powerful connector, and you're talking about how other digital tools can be as well. I saw Del Irani, who used to be the economics reporter on ABC Breakfast, on a presentation, and she was talking about how for her Zoom is an intimate medium, because you're going right into people's houses, right into people's personal spaces. And that's how she views Zoom. And I thought that was a beautiful way of putting it. So I agree, Dee, that I think technology can be a powerful connector. If you think about those design principles, I mean, you obviously are strongly motivated to connect people. So you're strongly motivated to design for that, and you're mindfully using your technical tools to do that. And the problem with too much Zoom and PowerPoint presentations is that people are hiding behind the technology, I think, whether it's lack of confidence or just laziness, but they're, you know, they're not using it. Sharon, you've got your hand raised. Thanks, Dee. Just
on that, I really think that Zoom and web conferencing is quite a new medium. Like even before COVID, we were struggling in offices on how to make it work. And that's not down to the technology. That is down to understanding. It's one thing to say, here, have a camera and a microphone. And by the way, it has all these functions you can do, like, you know, raise your hand and share a screen. That's great. That's functionality. But what that's not doing is learning how to use the powers of it. Like take Twitter, for example. Twitter is a very simple solution to a very simple thing. 120 characters, although you're 240 characters, whatever it is these days. A message. But look how it's being used. Look how it was used in the floods to rally people to say, you know, this person needs help. Great, was looking at these people. It's knowing how that technology can be used. And we're all still figuring that out.
Yeah. I think that's a fantastic point. I agree totally. And I remember 2019, I was awful on Zoom. I was terrified of it. And the big favor that lockdown did for me was force me on it, and I got used to it. And now I'm really enthused about continuing my own personal journey about using it better. In that Welsh storytellers meetup online, somebody made the point, exactly what you said, Sharon, that it's a new medium and we're still learning how to use it. And he said it's a pity a lot of people are dismissing online interactions as being awful. And he said we're still learning, and we will discover new and better ways of using it. I just want to flag it's 7:30, so I know some of you might need to or want to take off. Susan just had to go for another appointment. I'm going to leave this Zoom room open for another 15 minutes for anybody who wants to hang out and continue chatting about this, but this session is now technically over, so I might stop the recording.